All right, back with Motor Learning for Coaches with Andy Bass and Kasey Crider. Wanted to start with Andy, and that first, just I think you told me you guys have 9 games left in the season. I know you're not counting down or keeping track, but I was curious, just kind of a day in the life. Like, what was the last 24 hours like for you? I mean, I'm picturing Major League Baseball. You're at the Four Seasons, probably got a massage. Maybe took your private jet. Like what's a 24-hour window looking like?
We certainly don't stay in Motel Sixes. The hotels are nice, and yet I think when a lot of people hear about my job or they hear about anything in Major League Baseball, we do have this idea that it is all comfort and luxury. And there are certainly some great amenities, but to take you through the last 24 hours, so we were just in Chicago. Um, it was a night game on a getaway day. So, we're getting to the field at probably 1 in the afternoon. You're going through a work day. Baseball is so ridiculous in that it is the only sport I can truly think of where we play every day and we practice every day, where we actually do a full-blown practice the day that we compete. So then the game gets over 3+ hours. You got an hour to pack up and eat. You bus 40 minutes to the airport. Yes, it is a charter flight, but it's still a United Airlines airplane. You fly to Cincinnati, you land, you get in at about 3 in the morning, you fall asleep, and then you have to play the next day. And that is pretty much 28 days out of the month with 2 days off or 3 days off every month. So it's great. It's fun. It's still Major League Baseball, but it is a grind, and they use that phrase for a reason.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I mean, obviously you're engaged and involved. Like you're not gonna go hit 100-mile-per-hour fastballs tonight. I can't imagine how, like, the experience you're just describing, like how does someone step into the plate and still have that level of focus and engagement? It sounds crazy.
I don't even play, and this is year 3, and I'm exhausted at this time every year. And yes, I don't have to hit 98 with sink or a 92-mile-an-hour sweeper that's moving a foot and a half. It's truly remarkable, and I'm biased because it's the sport that I'm in, and it's my guys, it's people that I consider teammates. But it's remarkable what these players can do.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Okay, so I guess it's not all steak dinners and massages and Four Seasons. Sounds like you are working a little bit. No, it sounds intense. Okay, well, we had the topic which had touched on a little bit, but I think it's a really important one, important to go into more detail and dive into this idea of self-determination theory. Can you just, for those who may forget what it is, and give us a quick reintroduction to the theory?
Yes, and based on what I'm going to talk about later, I do want to keep this short and sweet. I feel like self-determination theory, much like terms such as ecological dynamics or constraints-led approach, has kind of become synonymous with sport these days. We know these terms, but in a nutshell, self-determination theory is a meta theory of motivation, extrinsic to intrinsic motivation, where as human beings, we all have to have 3 basic psychological needs satisfied. We don't actually have to have them satisfied. We just have to perceive that we have these needs. Autonomy. Do I have agency and choice in the situation? Competence. That can be synonymous with confidence, but in the academic terms, it's competence. Do I feel capable in this situation? And relatedness. Am I connected to those around me? And typically, the more that those needs are satisfied, the more motivated we feel to engage in any particular activity. These needs are not created equally. They wax and wane as far as the importance to each person, situation to situation. Overall, John, I might value autonomy, that is having choice, more than you do. You may value relatedness more. But that's the beauty of the individualization of coaching, is that we need to recognize which players value which needs more or less. And the more that we as coaches can help these athletes, our athletes under our tutelage, perceive these psychological needs as met, typically the more motivated they feel to engage in the activity.
What is it with the researchers and threes? Like constraints-led approach, optimal. Is that they just all settle? It's like once we got three, we're done.
Yeah, it's got to be some kind of rhythm or alliterative effect.
Yeah. And then is it this originally wasn't from sport, but right, the research is maybe you could tell us, and then but it feels like it applies to sport.
Yeah, it wasn't originally with sport. Dr. Ducey and Dr. Ryan, like I said, it was more a meta theory of motivation, and they found that, this tended to be synonymous across the paradigm. And I think the biggest thing for me that has really stood out recently with not just this theory, but within sport, you think about sport and accountability and responsibility. The more that these basic psychological needs are met within a person, let's say that's a team captain, the more likely that that athlete is to take responsibility, to take ownership, and to basically have their locus of control internal. The less these needs are perceived to be met, the more likely an athlete is to lay blame on others, to not take accountability, and to have more of an external locus of control, as in, oh, I'm more fatalistic rather than more accountable in my own actions.
And I wanted real quick to go to what you had said, how people have different maybe needs within those three, like a priority. Do you guys have a sense of what yours is? Kasey, what would you say yours of the three?
For me personally,
Yeah.
gosh, it's really interesting because I was thinking about that as Andy was kind of touching on each of the points. I think for me, competence matters a lot. Like,
Yeah,
I
right.
feel most motivated when I feel most inspired, most motivated when I feel like, man, I have a clear sense of what I'm capable of and how I want to apply it. And I know autonomy is probably in there. They're all in there, right? I think for me, I just, but when I heard him say that, I'm like, man, when do I feel most discouraged, most demotivated? I think it's when I feel like I'm not very good, if that makes any sense. It's not that I don't have control over my own experience or that I don't feel connected to people. It's that I don't think that I'm very good. And then my motivation goes down. And that could be like a spiral, where like my motivation goes down and now I feel like I'm even worse because it's not going great. And so for me, the competence element, just hearing Andy say that, I'd probably need to do, some self-reflection. But the competence thing, I think, is the one that on initial listening is the one that feels most relevant, because if I'm not doing a good job, then I think that's when I feel at my least motivated, my least engaged. I kind of want to disconnect and disassociate, and when I'm feeling good, I feel like I'm cooking. I've read the literature, I've applied it well. I'm ready to practice 25 hours a day.
Yeah, that lines up. I think I would have guessed that for you if I was to guess the three. I was thinking about me, I would probably go to the relatedness. And again, yeah, I agree with all three. But I was thinking even some of the like partner choices I would make when I'd compete. I mean, I always wanted to win, but I would even, it's like, who's someone I'm gonna like want to win with, or someone I'm gonna connect with when we travel, or someone that I guess care for. And I think I've always valued that. So I jumped out. What about for you, Andy?
I was about to say, I'll complete this triad because mine is autonomy. And that's probably not surprising to the two of you on this call based on what my research has been within my PhD with self-controlled learning. I do think, though, it has a lot to do with my job. I'm just at the beck and mercy of baseball. I mean, get on the bus at 3, get on the plane at 10. I really don't have a lot of autonomy in my life. And my dad is going to listen to this at some point. So, Dad, know that I wouldn't trade my childhood for anything, but we grew up on a farm and Dad knew what to do. And so there was a list every day of, you need to check this many cows, you need to make sure the horses are fed. And it made me a responsible person. But and sport just does a terrible job of taking autonomy away from us. I'm sorry, we just do. Coaches, we love to have control and taking it away. So for me, it's definitely autonomy via what I've studied in graduate school. I love growing up on a farm, but there was always stuff to do. And when you're 8 years old, you don't have the foresight to look ahead. So your dad's telling you what to do. And now in baseball, 162 games, I just don't have a lot of choice 8 months out of the year in my life. And so I call it a chicken egg paradigm, but for me, it's autonomy.
Well, then, Andy, what would you like to talk about next?
Oh,
I don't want to make you say anything.
I feel so validated, and my basic psychological need satisfaction has my cup overfloweth at this point.
Yes, I did it. No, actually, I mean, if I was going to ask you, well, what do you want to talk about next? Yeah, you go.
So I did want to use self-determination theory to bridge into this idea of psychological safety with athletes. Another buzzword. I don't have social media, and because I don't have social media, the fact that I know this is a buzzword on Twitter and Instagram shows just how big it is. But really, it's the idea of psychological safety with coaches and athletes. And the big thing for me is listening and getting to the point. And I need to be very deliberate about this so I don't stick my foot in my proverbial mouth and come off like a hypocrite. I brought up my father earlier, and I think on this podcast before, John, I brought up a Winston Churchill quote of "It is slothful to not compress your thoughts." My dad was visiting me a couple weeks ago, and he brought up another great one. Mr. Churchill said, "If you want me to talk for 10 minutes, I'll need 10 days to prepare. If you want me to talk for an hour, I'll go right now." And I think with psychological safety, there are a lot of incredible concepts out there, like unconditional positive regard, things like motivational interviewing, positive affirmations. But for me, I think as coaches, we get so wrapped up in the idea of pouring into athletes and talking. Coaches, just in general, are the greatest at speaking without saying anything. And the person that's talking is the one that's learning. As coaches, let's have a shot clock in our head. Let's ask more questions more than we give answers. A good answer resonates more with an athlete than any a good question resonates more than a smart answer. Let's elicit information from the athlete. Let's cut down how often we're talking. Let's see if we can get the athlete to talk more than us, because we are the coach. There is an inherent power dynamic within us. It doesn't matter how good our relationship is with an athlete. We are still the coach making their decision about the athlete. The athlete is inherently not going to talk and open up if we're always talking. So let's ask good open-ended questions. Let's listen. Let's validate. Let's let them talk more than us. And is that going to happen within one session, one training time? No. But let's just, as coaches, start to wrap up our thoughts quicker and allow for the athlete to let us in versus us just explaining to the athlete.
Yeah, and I could see how this concept that you just brought, how that could apply to the self-determination theory. Just
Yes.
when I'm asking a question, then they have some autonomy. They get to be a part of the direction this conversation goes. We get to feel more connected because I'm, like you said, you're active listening. The coach is trying to understand and get some sort of perspective from what the athlete's saying. And then if they get to answer, then they're developing competence, like they're actually describing what they did, or so it seems like that ties in. Like if you're building psychological safety and asking questions, then it allows for the needs to be met.
1,000%. And coming out of COVID, I was listening to a poet on the radio, and they said the most important thing we can do with somebody is share space with them. And by sharing space, we are inherently bolstering those three basic psychological needs, because we are giving them, the person, the athlete in this situation that is lower on the proverbial ladder in the power dynamic, the opportunity to have autonomy, feel connected to us as we feel connected to them, and to feel like, hey, I'm really good in this conversation. I'm teaching my coach something. The more our athletes can teach us versus the other way around, the better, in my opinion.
Love that. So Kasey, then the application side, what does this look like in practice in the real world?
The self-determination theory stuff or the psychological safety?
I guess, I mean, it sounds like we're kind of bringing them together. You can go either direction. If there's one you want to go to the applied side.
Yeah, I mean, they both matter a lot to our program and to me. When I think of the self-determination stuff, the thing that comes to mind, like as a tangible applied example, would be the way we handle discipline in our program. And it's not something any coach, I think, loves. Obviously, you don't want anybody in your program to step outside of reasonable behaviors that need, addressing. But they do. Everyone does. Staff members, I do, our players do. And I think traditionally, wasn't it Wooden who said discipline something you do for somebody, not to somebody? I don't know why that stuck with me forever. Like it just, that statement, I heard it when I was like 12 years old. My dad was a huge Wooden fan. I heard it when I was like 12 years old. And like, it's magic. I mean, the guy was a poet, but it's just magic, this idea. And so I thought, okay, starting from there and kind of integrating some of these tenets of self-determination theory, so autonomy and competence and relatedness, we don't add anything to their day when they screw up. So we had an athlete like sleep through weights once. We had early morning weights back in the spring. She slept through weights. And it's not like, okay, you got double the weights or, the one thing we're going to do is, hey, we're going to be urgent about addressing behavior. We're not going to put stuff off. So let's hold off on doing anything with the program until we get this sorted. And the way we get it sorted is not her coming into my office and saying, here's what you're going to do to get this sorted. It's more, hey, let's sit down and have a chat about A, what happened, B, why, and C, what's next. And so she came into my office and she said, I just didn't sound an alarm. And I said, okay, well, A, thanks for telling the truth. A lot of times you get like these really bizarre excuses and yeah, I know your tricks, She said, I just didn't sound an alarm. And I slept through it. It was nothing. There was no reason for me to do that. I screwed up. And I said, okay, great. And I said, well, hey, I think you're capable of showing up to weights on time, and do you? She goes, yeah, of course. I go, yeah, I wouldn't ask you to do it if I didn't think you could. I think you're capable of that. And here's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that you need to sit down and chat and maybe write a note to the people that you've affected here, your teammates, the strength coach, maybe us as a staff, and just look them in the eye and say, hey, tell them the exact same thing you just told me. And the idea here is that I want you to relate to them. I want you to look at them and say, hey, I just screwed up. And it wasn't for any other reason than I screwed up. And I apologize. And once you've done that, let's just shake hands, say it's not going to happen again, and get back to volleyball. And she was frustrated with that. Not frustrated with that at all because she had to interact with teammates. She was frustrated that she wouldn't be able to do it in time for practice that afternoon. And I said, hey, look, there are some consequences. This is more urgent than you training today. And she was distraught. She's like, Kasey, I love practice. I want to practice. I didn't do it on purpose. And I go, hold on. If you did it on purpose, it's a completely different conversation. I would never assume that you'd do this on purpose. And she got to a point in the conversation where she's like, fine, whatever, I'll do it. And I go, no, we're not going to, you want to talk about psychological safety. You need some space to say what you think without fear of any unnatural consequence here. And so I pressed her a little bit. I said, no, tell me what you think. She goes, I think it's dumb. I think I screwed up and I don't think it affected anybody but me. And I think I should be able to practice. I'm not saying that I don't think I did something wrong, but I think I should be able to train to prepare for the best thing for the team is that I'm as ready as possible. And I go, that makes so much sense to me. We're still probably going to hold you out because we do need to send some signal that like, hey, look, there are some negative consequences, but I want you there and I want you keeping score and shagging and targeting and all that stuff. And after you tell your teammates individually that they're gonna be 100% in your corner, and they probably already are. And so she goes, okay, I got it. And she left, and she came back a couple days later and said, hey, thank you for letting me tell you what I think, because I didn't think that it was going to go great if I did. I thought you were going to yell or get angry or punish me more or something like that. And I said, well, you're not always going to get what you want. Psychological safety is not, everything is smooth and comfortable and easy and accommodating. But it is the ability to speak up, be yourself, say what you think, and not have any fear of consequences that would be unnatural. If you say something rude, I'm going to say, that's rude, don't say that. That's a natural consequence to saying something rude. But passive aggression isn't. And, a lack of engagement isn't. A massive gap in the hierarchy isn't psychologically safe, and it's not necessary it's not a natural consequence. Those things don't have to be present when there's conflict. So she thanked me, and I remember thinking like, "Ooh, yikes! Which way is this going to go?" And she thanked me and said, "Hey, I thought about it, and I really appreciate you letting me speak up, and it didn't change anything. And I go, it won't always. A lot of times it will, but it didn't always." And so I tried to implicitly touch on all three of those things. I tried to give her some conversational element, some space to say, hey, here's what I think should happen. It doesn't mean she's always going to get what she wants, but she had some space. I told her, I think that you're capable of doing this right. And I asked her, does she think? And she agreed. And then I sat down and said, hey, we're going to relate, and you're going to relate with all these other people so that whenever we're done with this, people feel better about their relationship with you, not worse. I tried to touch on all three. as opposed to just saying, okay, you're out of practice for a week, or you got extra weights, or, you have to carry the bags on the road or whatever. I tried to make it something that would be ultimately productive for her, something that we did for her, not something we did to her, if that makes any sense. That was, I had self-determination theory in the back of my mind as I was going through that. And we don't have a lot of discipline issues here. We got a kid who slept through weights. That's the biggest thing we've had so far, thankfully. So maybe if it comes up something more serious, it'd be different. But maybe the reason we don't have those things is because we're going about it that way. Or maybe they're just fooling me,
That's a great example of the needs being met. And Andy, you'd mentioned that there's responses when the needs aren't met. So if I'm a coach and, we all have blind spots, I'm not aware, okay, I understand this concept. I want to be creating this environment so people feel like these needs are met. But if I have, maybe I have blind spots and I want to look for responses that show that the needs aren't being met, what sort of things would I be looking for?
I think you would get very short answers to questions. You would probably see isolating behaviors. And as coaches, just recognize body language. How often are they interacting with teammates? Certainly, we have introverts and extroverts. I think the biggest red flag for me would be personalities are on a continuum. But when you, the coach, interact with an athlete, how eloquent or how descriptive an answer are you getting to certain questions, and how willing is a player to extrapolate with you? I think that would be a great tell for not only are their needs being met, but how psychologically safe does that athlete feel with you, whoever you, the coach, is.
If I have a player, and I'm actually thinking one of my players who is more introverted, and maybe not so much with me, like I think one-on-one, she's conversational and comfortable and connected, but it feels like with the team, with the group, like she's a little bit on the outside. It feels like my first response is like, tell the other girls, I go see if you can go set up have a coffee, but then I don't know if I'm just like forcing something, like it doesn't need to be more natural. And I guess, is there ways to, like, for someone who's more introverted, maybe not naturally drawn to connecting, is there a way to bring that about, or is me just setting stuff up? Is that the way I got to go?
I do think that there's something to be said for that, whether that is certain team building activities to a point. And yet at the same time, I you've had Bernie on this podcast before. I love his term for himself. He's a friendly introvert. Sometimes introverts don't need to be around people. That's their way to recharge their batteries. I'm very similar to that. The whole it depends thing flows really well here. Sometimes maybe that athlete, they're just not the person to really want to hang out outside of the field, and that's okay as long as they're connecting either with others in their life or with those of the field. So as coaches, have some feel. That old term, having feel, but we don't always have to fit a square peg in a round hole. As I mentioned earlier, the needs are not created equally, and sometimes we don't need to foster relatedness any more so than we have within an athlete, because that limited amount of interaction with their teammates throughout the day is enough to fill that.
Would you say, as I'm thinking about this, Kasey, would we, like, should we as coaches be thinking about, and maybe asking them, I don't know, like what would be the priority need for each player? Like, should we be aware of that? Or is that something you think you are aware of, that you're meeting the need for each individual?
No, definitely not. I mean, I'm definitely not meeting the specific needs of every kid as much as I'd love to. And I strive to, without question. I think acknowledging that not only am I human, but I'm a relatively, despite appearances, I'm a relatively young human, particularly in the profession. My role, it's my second season. So the likelihood that I'm like nailing the needs of every single kid is zero. I'm not. I know that. And so there's some grace for myself. Hopefully there's some grace from the athletes. There's some understanding that if the responsibility is entirely mine, our program won't be at its best. So the assistants needs to be on it. The team needs to be on it. And I think that's where we're at our strongest. We have some people, and typically I don't say athletes' names, but this person's so special that I will. We have a gal who's from Mililani, Hawaii, named Asia Miller, who is like an extreme introvert. She is not somebody, like, she'll sit and talk to you for 4 hours, but like She's not going to be the life of any party. She's not, but she is very deliberate and very intentional and very genuine in trying to include people. And this is one of the most excellent athletes that we have on our roster. Freshman year, setter of the year in the conference. Sophomore year, all conference outside hitter. Junior year, libero of the year in the conference. This year, she's a setter, hitter, opposite. She does literally everything, and she's been one of the best players in the history of the conference. And she does a wonderful job putting her arm around as many teammates as she possibly can in a way that's genuine to her, including them in her pursuit of being great. And I think when we talk about leadership, that's exactly what elite leadership is. It's not leading by direction. You hear this example that's given constantly, lead by example. Well, yeah, it's fine, but what if people aren't paying attention? And there's kind of the deal is you lead by inclusion. I'm going to go pursue being excellent, and I'm going to put my arm around as many people as I can. And Asia Miller is elite at that. So in all the areas, in all the moments that I come up way short in terms of understanding the needs of the 15 girls that are on our team, I do have confidence that, other staff members are on it and see it and discuss it and foster it. I also have confidence that a lot of our athletes, Asia probably chief among them, is doing it as well. So it's a group deal. But no, to answer your question bluntly, no, I don't. And I have come to the conclusion that I probably would drive myself insane trying to be perfectly connected to every athlete all the time. It's a honorable goal and one that I certainly have. But there's a realistic understanding that I won't. And pretending like I do is not the way either. I don't go, yeah, of course I am. So perfectly connected to all that means. I'm not. That's the reality. Dealing reality. I'm not. I'd like to be. So keep pushing towards that if I can, but also make sure that things are in place that can, make, on the whole, everybody's taken care of by one person or another. It's not going to be just me.
That's great. So Andy, as we're kind of closing up, I was thinking it'd be maybe helpful to again highlight some of maybe the benefits of creating this sort of environment, thinking about self-determination theory. I know you mentioned some of the notes you shared. There's this like basically mental toughness that's built, like how it inherently increases it. Could you take us through like why that would be and maybe some of the characteristics we'd see?
Certainly. Well, I think a term that's synonymous with mental toughness is motivation. It's motivation contextually, it's motivation in the moment, and it's motivation big picture. So if that's what we're doing, if somebody is intrinsically motivated to engage in whatever scenario that is mental toughness, because they're going to want to push through and they're going to want to enjoy, quote unquote, being there, regardless of the scenario. And along with what I mentioned earlier, the desire to take accountability, that requires a level of introspection that leads to mental toughness, that leads to self-awareness, that leads to growth. All of those things play into elite performance. And it's, I sometimes get a little irked when I see this, after a football game on Sunday night, the quarterback still does well, but the team loses. And he says, it was all my fault. I didn't do this. I didn't do that. And it's admirable. And I get that. But I think there is a level of pride in that, I'm taking accountability and responsibility. Me as the fan, I'm like, no way, it was all on you. You're just one person, even if you are the quarterback. But I think the desire to admit that we were wrong or that we made a mistake leads to that growth and that mental toughness and that mindset. And if we can create that self-determined motivation within our athletes, then our athletes inherently know that this environment that I'm in, that has been created by the coaches, is something that's helpful and it's beneficial and it's safe, because I've been able to grow and because I am this kind of introspective person, which leads me to the idea of psychological safety. If our athletes are willing to have difficult conversations with us in the middle of the gym, in the middle of the field, in the middle of wherever we are, we've created psychological safety within that athlete. The deeper an athlete is willing to go with us on their life or what they're feeling in the moment, that's our litmus test for creating psychological safety.
Hey, John, what are the things that how does this stuff fit into LMU? I mean, you guys have been so good, and it was a significant jump over the last 4 or 5 years. And I know this stuff matters to you. What's it look like for like what is LMU? What does psychological safety mean to LMU volleyball, beach volleyball?
I think we're out of time. We just got to our
What a weenie.
30
What a
minutes.
weenie.
Hey, we talked about how psychologically safe a person feels with how willing they are to be open.
Oh man, all right. I'm better when I can prepare more. I like just I have all these questions I thought about, and I like to ask you guys. Yeah, I wish I had something real like thoughtful and deep to like some example at the top of mind, but I mean, I guess kind of going, I guess, first to the self-determination theory. I think I'm constantly thinking about autonomy. That one stands out where I'm even just we're making a decision about how we have a competition Friday today, and we're going to decide how the format was going to be set up, and yeah, I just thought it was important to talk to the group first. Like, here's some of the ideas we're considering. What would be best? What would what would be most fair the way we set up this little competition we're running. And I think I do it because I'm genuinely curious, but also my understanding of just how often, like how important autonomy is, and how much people feel like they have a say over what they're involved in. So that comes up a lot. And I guess I'm not going to psychological safety. I'm going more to the self-determination theory, but relatedness. I mean, I think one of my favorite parts of the job is the like meeting with the athletes daily, asking questions about class, family, what their favorite food is, just getting to know them. And that's been probably my favorite part of doing it now, 9 years. Now I've gotten to go to some my players' weddings, meet some their kids. Like it's like that to me is the stuff that makes being a college coach really special, and that makes me I feel the pressure to want to do it well. So I have these relationships and I have this connection, and that people feel that I made an impact, but they also want me to stay in their lives. I think that to me is a sign of that I won, and that there is that relatedness. And I guess going to the competence, I mean the podcast, and thanks to you guys, like you guys help me stay competent, and hopefully I'm showing that and bringing that to the program, and then I think through asking questions, through giving them autonomy, I think they develop competence on their own too. So that's just me rambling, which is usually not a good thing, but yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Love it. That's awesome.
Yeah, so we'll close it there. I love I feel like we could do a deeper dive on psychological safety. There's some, and obviously all of this stuff we could do deeper dives, but I think we hit on some good components of self-determination theory, and even how the psychological safety effect is a part of it. But I think we'll have to do another episode where we go even deeper into psychological safety. But this was fun. Thanks, guys. It was good to connect again, and look forward to doing it again soon.